Ottawa says it's working on a plan to alleviate the long lines and delays that are creating a nightmare for travelers at Toronto's Pearson Airport. But according to one former airline industry insider, the problems may well get worse before they get better. Greg Ross explains.
This year, it's supposed to be 3 to 4 times bigger than they were in 2021.
Duncan Dee is the former chief operating officer at Air Canada. He says after being grounded by the pandemic for so long, people are itching to travel again this summer.
You've got Canadians who have been planning this particular holiday for 2 years.
If they're flying out of Pearson, they may need to prepare for long lineups getting through security. Some travelers we spoke to were pre-warned about these issues by their airlines.
I got a message to arrive a lot earlier than normal.
Just the check-in notice from Air Canada said leave lots of time.
The government says they're beefing up the workforce to alleviate the problem.
We are adding additional CBSA officers. We're also adding additional CATSA officers.
They've hired 400 new airport security agents at Pearson who are expected to be trained and in place by the end of the month. But Dee says the government knew about the problem months ago and should have had them in place long before now.
When the government decides to put brand new rookie screeners on the screening lines at the start of the peak, it's a recipe for disaster.
Many international travelers flying into Pearson have experienced huge delays as well.
Customs was about 3 hours, got through, flight canceled from Toronto to Boston. All right, at this point, now I go and I see there is a 400-person line.
Former NHLer turned podcaster Ryan Whitney took to social media to complain about the issues he had connecting through Pearson last week. Dee says these issues are largely due to COVID protocols in place at customs.
What happens to an international traveler? They get to the officer, they've got to provide them with their vaccination certificate, they've got to provide them with their ArriveCAN QR code, and they have to determine whether or not they'd be selected for random testing.
Dee says screening at customs now takes on average 4 times longer than it did pre-pandemic. The Minister of Transportation says they're working to ease some of these delays.
International travelers who have a connecting flight now are no longer eligible for random testing.
Well, for more now on these travel delays, we have reached Duncan Dee and Andrew Weir. Duncan, you just met in Greg's story, former Chief Operating Officer at Air Canada Airlines. And Andrew Weir, the Executive Vice President of Destination Toronto, an online guide for Toronto tourism. Gentlemen, thank you both for your time this morning.
Thanks so much.
Duncan, let me begin with you as the industry insider. Well, we just heard how one former NHL player described the state of things at Pearson. How would you describe what's going on and how we got here?
Well, thank goodness for that NHL player and his viral video, which has now been seen by 2 million people, because we've been here. We didn't just get here. We've been here now for at least 2 months. And I'd argue that many of the problems we're seeing today were around even well before COVID. It's just now there's attention being paid to it, and hopefully the government will finally fix many of these longstanding issues.
We've heard about the delays at customs. For example, you have said it takes 4 times longer now to clear customs because of the COVID measures, the vaccine proof and that kind of thing. What do you mean when you say there are problems that were existing before that have now been exacerbated?
Well, there are longstanding structural issues, in particular regarding airport security, which have been around, frankly, for a decade, if not longer. Canada has a airport security governance structure which is unparalleled on the planet. It's a dog's breakfast in terms of an organizational structure, and it's something which is contributing to the dysfunction we see at the airports. It should never, ever take travelers 3 hours or 4 hours to clear airport security in April and May in Canada. There shouldn't be no crowds in airports in April and May in Canada because schools are not out. We only have 2 relatively minor travel weekends in both months. And these lines started forming at the start of April.
You make a good point, and that we're talking about months that aren't even the summer peak, which is around the corner. Andrew, to you on this, I'm wondering what kind of an impact you are seeing or that you fear we might see when it comes to tourism, particularly, obviously, in Toronto and Ontario, but Toronto being a hub to the rest of Canada, it does extend across the country.
It's The impact we're seeing now is really the anecdotal one. I don't know if I share Duncan's view of the thank goodness about the video. It certainly brings the issues more to light. But it's videos like that that are concerning, and those experiences are concerning because the reputational impact this will have over the long run can be very significant. And this is partly about leisure travel. This is also about the major meetings and conventions and the business travel that comes to the city. And all a meeting planner has to do is take one look at these experiences and hear these stories, and then think twice about whether or not they want to bring 5,000 people to the city. And that's one person making a decision that impacts 5,000 people or 8,000 or 3,000 people visiting the city. And so the impact may be down the road. It may be decisions that are being made now not to book a meeting for Toronto that could happen in 2025. But when those years start to come and we look around and there may be fewer meetings, you think back to what was happening at the time those meetings were booked. And this issue is right at the top of that list.
Because, of course, as you point out, when a convention's being booked of 5,000 people, that's happening now for several years from now. So to your point about the delay. And let's talk a little bit more about the reputational damage that you are concerned about. What makes Toronto such a draw for large conventions and meetings, and how is that at risk with this?
Well, look, a lot of what makes Toronto such a compelling destination is still very much true. I don't want to suggest that that's somehow vanished, but access has always been one of the winning hands that we've played. The fact that you can get here from anywhere, and particularly for U.S. meeting planners, and this goes beyond meetings. When you look at the broader economic development ecosystem, foreign direct investment and talent attraction, all of these dimensions of economic development depend on access. It's at the heart. And so when access suddenly becomes questioned, when it's not the advantage that it used to be, then suddenly we don't have the full hand that we used to play. And reputationally, even when the problems are solved, people will remember these stories. And that's why we're very concerned about this being addressed with great urgency. It's not just about getting it right for the next couple of weeks. If we don't get it right very quickly, we've got a 33,000 person tech conference, the Collision Conference, coming in a few weeks. If we don't get it right ahead of that, then all the people coming for that conference will have this experience. And what will they be thinking about next time they're thinking about investing here or thinking about traveling here? So the long tail of this could be very significant.
Duncan, we have heard from several cabinet ministers a task force has been formed by the federal government to look into this. Yesterday, the Transport Minister Omar Alghabra announced 850 new agents have been hired, security agents. Are you optimistic that wheels are in motion to clear the backlog?
Optimistic, I think, would be too positive a descriptor for myself. I mean, I think that what worries me the most about what the minister announced is we don't know what it's based upon. Is 400 the right number and now it's 800? Is that the right number? Well, why is 1,000 not the right number, or 1,200? It seems like these numbers are being pulled out of thin air. He's also not been very forthcoming about the timeline for the arrival of these agents. So, does that mean that these screeners are going to be starting by the end of June? With the additional 450 agents he's now found, where have they been? Are they in training right now? He's planning on starting rookie agents at the worst possible time of year. So is 800 better than 400? Yes. But what's the basis for some of these decisions? I think I just wanted to further address a point that Andrew made regarding the importance of the reputational issue for Toronto. This isn't just Toronto. This is Canada. You've got a massive hub in Toronto, but you've also got hubs in Vancouver and Montreal that are impacted. And when the world sees what's happening at Pearson, or travelers experience what's happening in Pearson, Vancouver, and Montreal, it is a huge reputational damage for us from a tourism, travel, investment perspective.
Andrew, final thought to you. I'm wondering what you're hearing from those in the travel and tourism industry and what they are hoping will happen now. I think you might be up. There you go.
It's largely anecdotal at this point, what we're seeing. And so I think there's an opportunity to get this right. There's an opportunity for it to have been a a short blip from a public perception. As Duncan said, this has been the reality for some time, and the root causes have been in place for some time. But if it can be solved quickly, then we can move past it. If we don't address it quickly, then the greater issues will come. And I think the professional travelers, the tour operators and the meeting planners recognize that you can have these blips, but that makes it so important that we solve it quickly and get all the different government offices and agencies that are involved in this. As Duncan said, there's so many of them. Get them working together on focus on the solution so that we don't have that long-term reputational damage that we're also concerned about.
We really appreciate your context from both of you on this morning. Thank you so much for your time. Former Chief Operating Officer at Air Canada, Duncan Dee, and Executive Vice President of Destination Toronto, Andrew Weir. Thank you again.
Thank you.